She laughed when the attorney handed her the envelope. Not a big laugh, just that smug, lopsided little smirk she always gave when she thought she had already won. She didn't even wait. She tore it open with her manicured nails, leaned back in the leather chair, and began reading. I watched the color drain from her face before she even reached the second paragraph. There were 23 people in the room. Half of them looked like they hadn't cried once at her father's funeral. But the moment Hollis started trembling, every fork stopped clinking, every fake chuckle died. The silence wasn't just awkward. It was sharp. She turned to the lawyer. "This has to be a mistake." His voice didn't flinch. "It isn't." She turned to me next. I didn't say a word. I just reached for my water glass and took the slowest sip of my life. The thing is, she thought divorcing me before the reading would clean her hands. She thought taking the money and walking away without a confrontation would be neat, elegant, untraceable. But her father wasn't a fool. And apparently, neither was I. Let's rewind exactly 13 days. I was sleeping in the laundry room. By choice. No, because she said I snored too loud and smelled like printer paper. Whatever that means. We hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. Our texts were just reminders about milk or trash pickup. She would disappear to her friend Marlene's lake house on weekends. Sometimes during the week, too. I stopped asking questions. I was tired of the answers I didn't get. Then Orville, her father, died. It was sudden. Heart failure, they said. He was 78 but still did daily Pilates and posted weird motivational quotes on LinkedIn. He had a handshake like a bear trap. And despite hating my taste in socks and my career choices, he always looked me in the eye. Hollis didn't cry when she got the call. She ordered a bottle of Prosecco. "I guess I'm an heiress now," she said, almost to herself. And then she looked at me like I was a coffee stain on her kitchen counter. The next morning, she left the house with a duffel bag and a fresh blowout. On the 5th day, she came back home with divorce papers. "I've made up my mind, Emery," she said. "You'll land on your feet." That was the moment I realized she had been waiting for this. Maybe for years. All she needed was the final piece, her father's death. And now, 13 days later, we were sitting at this long table with crystal glasses, silver folders, and enough polished wood to make a Viking ship jealous. She thought the will would say one sentence. All assets to Hollis Langford. But it didn't. Because deep down, her father had known the truth. About her weekends. About Marlene's lake house. About the duffel bags and fake smiles and frozen hugs. And he wrote it all down. Right there. In black and white. With witnesses. With terms. Terms she hadn't read until just now. Terms that made me. The man she just tried to erase. Central to everything. And while she sat there blinking, shaking, trying to comprehend how her $379 million prize had just been snatched back midair, I finally took a deep breath. Not because I had won, but because, for the first time in forever, she finally lost. The room remained still long after she finished reading the clause. Her hands were clenched so tight around the paper that her knuckles looked bleached. The page trembled in her grip, as if it carried a heartbeat of its own. I could almost hear her mind turning over, thrashing against what she had just learned. But she said nothing. Not to me. Not to the lawyer. Not even to herself. The attorney, Mr. Merriweather, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat gently, like a man about to read a weather report, not drop the final match into a gasoline lake. As stated, Mr. Langford's estate, valued at $379 million, is not to be released in full to Ms. Hollis Langford unless she is legally married to Emery J. Flint at the time of disbursement, and has been for no less than 90 consecutive days following the certification of his death. You could practically hear the air escaping her chest. I sat very still. I didn't need to react. My silence was already louder than her entire past month of lies. She blinked, as if those words were going to rearrange themselves into something more favorable. But they didn't. They stayed locked in place, sharp and final. She opened her mouth once, maybe to protest, maybe to scream, but nothing came out. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, flipping the page like this was some bedtime story. In the event that Hollis Langford initiates divorce proceedings before the end of the 90-day period, the estate will be divided equally between her legal spouse and Langford Charitable Holdings. You know what it's like to watch someone unravel without making a single sound? That's what I saw in front of me. Her shoulders caved inward. Her eyes darted around the table looking for someone to object, to challenge it, to say it was a mistake, a forgery, anything. But no one did. Because it wasn't. She had divorced me 2 weeks too early. And now, the money, the entire empire she'd been planning to take solo to God knows where, was locked in a vault she no longer had the key to. That key, somehow, unbelievably, was me. It wasn't until we were back in the hallway, outside the carved wooden doors of the estate firm, that she finally turned to me. Her voice was low and raspy. "Did you know about this?" I looked at her, and in that moment, I think something in me died for good. "No," I said honestly. "But your father clearly did." Her mouth twitched. "He hated you." "Maybe, but he hated liars more." I didn't wait for her response. I just walked away. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to be away from her perfume, away from her nails clacking on her phone screen, away from everything that smelled like fake. By the time I got to the parking garage, I finally let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. It came out like a sob, but not quite. Like my body couldn't tell if it was relief or grief. I hadn't even considered what this meant for me. All I could think about was how deliberate this clause had been. Orville must have seen something, maybe years ago, and instead of confronting her directly, he left a slow-burning fuse she'd never see coming until it was too late. And now here I was, the idiot who wore clearance rack shoes and printed spreadsheets for a living, suddenly listed as the gatekeeper to nearly $400 million. It didn't even feel real. But it was. Because 2 days later, she showed up at my motel door. Hair brushed. Red lipstick. No ring. "Can we talk?" she asked, trying to smile. That was when I knew she hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to negotiate. She stood at the threshold of the motel room like she was on stage, and the show had just started. Hair done, lashes curled, a dress I knew she only wore when she needed things to go her way. She even had on those earrings her dad gave her, the ones she once called insurance-level sparkle. I stared at them, at her, and tried to remember the last time she came to see me without looking like she had a plan. "I thought we could talk," she said again, softer this time, like she was trying out a new role. "Can I come in?" I should have said no. Should have told her to find a lawyer or a mirror. But I stepped aside. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still wanted closure. Or clarity. Or maybe I was just that pathetic. She sat on the edge of the bed like she'd never seen a $42 per night comforter in her life. She looked around like she might catch a disease from the wallpaper. "This place is temporary, right?" I didn't answer. I let her marinate in the awkwardness. Finally, she cleared her throat. "So this clause. We need to talk about it." "No," I said quietly. "You need to talk about it. I'm just here." Her smile faltered, but only slightly. "Look, Emery, I know things have been tense between us, but I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. And maybe this situation, this bizarre clause, is actually a sign. Like, maybe your staying in my life was meant to happen." She said that with a straight face. I blinked. "Are you saying my existence is suddenly meaningful because your father put a $sign next to my name?" "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant." She sighed, trying to keep the act together. "I'm offering you something that benefits both of us. If we remarry, for the clause, you'll get half. It's spelled out in the document. 50% to you, 50 to me. No tricks. Clean, simple. Then we can split again. Peacefully. You'll be a multi-millionaire, Emery. You could start over anywhere." My mouth was dry. Not because of the money. Because of how calm she was. How businesslike. As if our marriage was a layaway item she could return and re-buy depending on the season. What if I say no? She hesitated for the first time. That would be disappointing. Disappointing, I repeated. "Emery, come on. You live in a motel. You're eating gas station soup. You think this is some kind of moral battleground, but it's just math. We both walk away with a fortune. We never have to see each other again after that." I stood there for a long time, silent, letting the motel's buzzing wall light fill the gaps she left. "You think this is about money?" I finally asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Isn't it?" "No," I said. "It's about you expecting me to be as hollow as you are." Her lips twitched, but she didn't blink. The thing is, she almost had me. She was right about my bank account, right about the motel, right about the late-night shame I felt walking past the vending machine with the broken 7 on it. But something had shifted in me after that reading. It wasn't just that I saw her differently. It's that I saw myself differently. And what I saw wasn't someone who needed a handout. It was someone who finally understood just how manipulated he'd been for nearly 2 decades. She stood up. "Think about it," Okay? Don't be emotional. This is a business decision. I smiled for the first time in weeks. See, that's the difference between us, Hollis. I was never in a business. I was in a marriage. She didn't respond. Just grabbed her bag and walked out without looking back again. But this time, I noticed something else. She had left behind her phone charger. And that seemed odd. Because Hollis never forgot anything. I stared at the charger coiled like a sleeping snake on the nightstand, and something inside me itched. Hollis never forgot her charger. Never. This was the woman who labeled her nail polishes by season, who once drove 40 miles back to a coffee shop just to retrieve her travel-size perfume. Forgetfulness wasn't in her DNA, which meant leaving this behind was deliberate. For a solid 2 minutes, I just stood there, arms crossed, staring at that stupid white cord. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she had another charger in the car. Or maybe, just maybe, it was bait. And if it was, I had to know what for. I picked it up, rolled it in my hand. It was warm. She must have unplugged it just before knocking on my door. I don't know why, but I plugged it into my own phone, like I was expecting it to whisper secrets. Of course, it didn't. It just charged. But then I looked at the plug, at the tiny writing on the bottom. It wasn't hers. It had a small pink sticker with the initials MH. Marlene Huxley. That name hit me like cold water. Marlene was her best friend. The one with the lake house. The one Hollis had been disappearing to over and over. The one who never replied to any of my texts, even when I asked if Hollis was safe during that snowstorm in February. I had known something wasn't right, but I let it go. I told myself not to be paranoid. That Hollis just needed space. And now her friend's charger was here, delivered by my ex-wife like a breadcrumb trail. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every time Hollis said Marlene was just a sister to her. Every time she came home with lake water still clinging to her hair, smelling like wine in someone else's fireplace. I thought about the nights I stayed home, folding laundry, while she was figuring herself out. And then I thought about Orville's claws, how precise it had been, how surgical. He hadn't just been protecting his money. He'd been drawing a line around something no one else could see. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I called Marlene. She didn't answer. I left a message. Calm, neutral. Just said I wanted to return something of hers. Told her she could come pick it up anytime. I didn't say what it was. Didn't say where I was. I just let it hang in the air like bait. If they were still in contact, if Hollis had told her anything about our encounter, she'd know what it meant. And if she didn't call back, well, that would be even louder. 2 hours later, my motel phone rang. I didn't even know it could ring. I picked it up, heart racing. Hello? Is this Emery? A man asked. Yes. This is Richard Carmichael. I'm calling on behalf of the Langford estate. I froze. Okay. I need you to come in this afternoon. There's been an update to the conditions of the will, and I believe you'll want to see it in person. An update? I hung up with a head full of static. What could have changed? The will had already been read, signed, processed. I was just starting to wrap my head around the original terms. The thought of it shifting again made my chest tighten. By the time I arrived at the law office, the clouds outside looked like they were holding in bad news. Mr. Merriweather met me in the waiting room. His expression was unreadable as always, stone carved into his suit. Mr. Flint, he said, guiding me into a private office, we've received new documentation that may alter the distribution of the Langford estate. What kind of documentation? I asked, my voice already breaking before I wanted it to. He opened a leather folder and turned it toward me. A photo sat inside. My breath caught. It was grainy. Security footage. Dated the night before Orville's death. It showed Hollis, standing outside his study window, arguing with someone. A shadowed figure, hard to identify, but feminine. Sharp chin. Short blonde hair. Marlene. There was another image, inside the study, the lights on. Orville was standing. And he wasn't alone. He was holding a letter in one hand, and in the other, a phone. His face was red. Furious. And behind him, in the corner of the frame, Hollis and Marlene again. Then a third image, just minutes later, showed the room dark. Still. No one at the window. No one standing. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Orville didn't just die of heart failure. He died right after that meeting. And Hollis had never told me she was at the house that night. Why are you showing me this? I asked, barely above a whisper. Mr. Merriweather looked straight into me. Because the revised clause states that if evidence arises suggesting coercion, fraud, or undue influence contributed to Orville Langford's death, the estate will not be dispersed to Hollis Langford or any of her known associates. I couldn't speak. I was no longer the footnote in this story. I had become the key witness. I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes after leaving the estate office, keys in the ignition, engine cold. My knuckles were still white from gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't even looking at anything. I was just staring out, through myself, trying to make sense of the impossible. She was there. The night he died. Hollis and Marlene. Outside Orville's window. Arguing. And inside. What? Confrontation? Threats? Regrets? Then darkness. Then death. I always thought betrayal came with shouting and slammed doors, not pixelated freeze frames on grainy security footage. I felt sick. Not just betrayed, but stupid. Deeply, cosmically stupid. I had spent years folding her sweaters just right so they wouldn't crease. I had left the porch light on every time she stayed late at book club. I let myself believe that the coldness in her wasn't permanent, just seasonal. Like she was winter, and I was spring, and we'd meet somewhere in the middle. But I never even made it past October. When I finally drove back to the motel, the world outside felt off. Like everyone else was walking a few seconds ahead of me, while I trailed behind in a fog of secrets I never asked for. I kept hearing Mr. Merriweather's words in my head: coercion, fraud, or undue influence. It sounded like courtroom language. Language people used when they wanted justice or revenge. If I handed over the footage to the authorities, Hollis wouldn't just lose the money. She could lose everything. Reputation. Safety. Maybe even her freedom. But if I stayed silent, I'd be complicit. I'd be exactly what she always said I was: passive, predictable, weak. I laid on the motel bed and stared at the ceiling again. I hated how familiar it had become. I hated that the ugliest wallpaper I'd ever seen now felt like home. That night, I dreamed I was drowning in money. Literal bills, hundreds, 20s, coins pressing down on my chest. And Hollis stood above me with a champagne flute, watching me sink. She didn't look angry. She looked amused. When I woke up, the charger was gone. I swear it was there the night before. I had left it on the table, beside a napkin with notes I scribbled down: Marlene, conflict, Orville equals clause trap, H's motivation timeline. And now it was all gone. The napkin, the charger, everything. My first instinct was to blame myself. Maybe I misplaced it. Maybe housekeeping tossed it. Maybe I was just spiraling. But then I noticed something even more chilling. The latch on the motel room window was unlocked. I never opened it. Not once. The AC unit was already broken and rattled like a dying blender. I never touched that window, but someone else had. I checked my phone. No new texts. No missed calls. But one app had a red dot I hadn't noticed before. Voice recorder. I tapped it. There was a single file. Timestamp 3:17 a.m. I pressed play. The recording began with silence, just faint room ambience, the fridge humming, a soft car passing. And then, a breath. Then a whisper. You should have just signed, Emery. You're not built for this. It was Hollis. Then another voice, barely audible, lower, sharper. Clocks ticking. That was Marlene. My blood turned cold. I didn't remember waking up. Didn't remember anyone in the room. But they had been there. While I slept. While I dreamed of drowning. They had come in, stolen the charger, taken my notes, and left a message. Not just a warning. A declaration. They knew I had the footage. Or at least suspected. They were watching me now. I sat back, heart pounding, and realized something sickening. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. She had lost the fortune. But she wasn't going to lose the narrative. And I had just become the loose end she needed to tie up. Or cut off. I didn't leave the motel for the next 48 hours. I kept the chair wedged under the doorknob. Slept with the lamp on. Kept one shoe on like I was waiting to bolt. Every sound, ice machine, footsteps, the occasional muffled TV, sounded like an approaching threat. I lived on coffee, crackers, and adrenaline. I tried to call the estate office again, but Merriweather wasn't taking calls until next week. They said he was traveling. Sure he was. The recording haunted me. The fact they were in my room, breathing over me, close enough to whisper into my phone, wasn't just terrifying. It was intimate in a grotesque way. Hollis used to whisper things to me in bed that made me feel like the only man alive. Now she whispered warnings while I slept like a corpse in a rented box. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just wait. So I left a burner voicemail for a private investigator I remembered helping my boss during a custody dispute years ago. The guy's name was Bryant. He sounded half asleep when he called me back, but once I said Langford Estate, his tone sharpened like a blade. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. "Bring anything you haven't told the lawyers." I didn't have much to bring, just the audio file, a backup copy of the footage from the estate's printer I scanned with a motel app, and my shaking hands. That night, something shifted. Around 11:30 p.m., I received an email from a strange address. No name, no subject, no signature, just a PDF. It was a scan of a letter, handwritten, scrawled in blue ink. At first, I assumed it was another threat. But the handwriting, it looked oddly familiar. Careless but stern, like someone who didn't waste time with cursive. I opened the file on my motel's painfully slow internet and began reading. To whom it may concern, and I suspect I know exactly who. If you're reading this, I'm dead. And no, I don't believe in dramatics, but I do believe in insurance. If you think this fortune is yours without question, you're mistaken. Hollis, if you're reading this, I warned you more times than I can count. I saw the lies in your eyes years ago, but I hoped you'd change. You didn't. You don't love him, but you underestimate him. That'll be your final mistake. Emery may seem like a houseplant in khakis, but he's honest. Honest is dangerous, because honest people remember. And if you try to erase him, well, that's why I left this letter behind. With witnesses, with timestamps, with backup copies in places even your lake house escapades won't reach. Let me be clear, if anything happens to Emery Flint, your access to this fortune dissolves. Permanently. And if you're thinking of calling this a forgery, you should know I dictated it in front of my attorney. There's a recording. I made sure of it. I built this empire, and I will not let it be inherited by cowards. Orville Langford. I had to sit down. Not because of the contents. I mean, yes, that too, but because someone had just risked sending this to me. It couldn't have been Merriweather. He was too careful, too legalistic. And it definitely wasn't from Hollis. So who? I read it again. And again. Houseplant in khakis. That part stuck with me more than I expected. Because Orville had said that to my face once, right before Thanksgiving. I'd been slicing green beans in their massive kitchen while Hollis took a call on the patio. He handed me a towel and said, "You're like a houseplant in khakis, Flint. Present, polite, and easily replaced." He'd laughed afterward, but I never did. And yet, here he was, after death, calling me honest, calling me dangerous. For the first time in my pathetic life, I was holding a letter that made me feel like someone actually saw me. Maybe not fondly, but fully. The next morning, I met Bryant at a diner off Route 6. He looked exactly like someone who used to work in military intelligence and now hated everyone. Shaved head, black turtleneck in June. Zero smiles. He read the letter 3 times, played the audio twice, then leaned forward and said, "You're in danger." "Yeah," I said. "I got that memo." "No," he said flatly. "You're not in danger because they hate you. You're in danger because they need you." That stopped me cold. He pulled out a worn notebook and started scribbling names. If they scare you into disappearing, the money defaults to them. If you fight, they stall and isolate you. But if you go public, they have to react. And they can't control the fallout. "I don't want fallout," I said. Too late. He handed me a flash drive. "This has the metadata from your letter." I ran it through validation software. "It's real. Dated. Traced. That recording exists." I stared at the drive like it was radioactive. "Your call," Bryant said. "Use it. Or bury it. Just know, if you don't act soon, someone else will. And next time, they won't just whisper." I didn't sleep the night I met with Bryant. Not because I couldn't, but because something in me refused to rest. My hands kept shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of decision. Because now I had one. And the truth is, I had never really made big decisions before. Not the kind that could change lives. Not the kind that triggered consequences. Most of my life had been a slow drift, paperwork, leftovers, and the illusion of routine. But that flash drive sitting on the motel table like a live grenade had cracked something open in me. Around 2:40 a.m., I opened my laptop. It still had crumbs in the keyboard from a vending machine cookie I didn't finish. I logged into an old Reddit account I hadn't used in years. Back then, I followed budget threads, anxiety support forums, weird subreddits about introverts who collect coins. Harmless stuff. But that night, I started typing a story. Not fiction. Not revenge porn. Not tabloid drama. Just the truth. No names. No dollar amounts. No locations. Just the facts. My ex-wife inherited hundreds of millions from her father's estate, but the will had a clause she didn't expect. Now she's trying to force me into signing something I don't trust, and I've started receiving late-night threats. I found out there may have been foul play the night her father died. I was contacted by someone anonymous with proof. If anything happens to me, it's on her. I'm scared. But I'm also done being silent. I posted it. I added no hashtags. No edits. No signature. Then I opened my email and scheduled a timed release of the scanned letter and audio file to 4 different addresses: my brother, an old coworker, my lawyer, and one encrypted link to myself as backup. All were set to go out in 24 hours unless I manually stopped them. Fail-safe. If I disappeared, the world wouldn't. I closed the laptop. Then everything went quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet you enjoy. It was the quiet of a world inhaling before a punch. The next day started like nothing had changed. Gray sky. The same motel clerk pretending to ignore me. The same cold water pressure that made me miss my own shower like a limb. Then around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, expecting another whisper. But instead, I heard a familiar voice, tired, soft, almost broken. "Emery," Hollis said. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. "I know what you posted," she continued. "It's going viral." She sounded nothing like herself. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said. I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, well, it never was." "I didn't kill him," she said. "You have to believe that." "I don't have to believe anything anymore," I replied. There was a long silence. Then, "They're going to open an inquiry. You started something you can't control." "I'm not trying to control it," I said. "That's your department." Another silence. Then, something cracked in her voice, like guilt, or fear, or maybe just the sound of a mask breaking after years of wear. "He changed the will weeks before he died," she whispered. I didn't know until it was too late. And Marlene? She knew. She pushed me to challenge it. Said it was an insult. Said I deserved it. "She was with you that night." "Yes. And now she's disappeared," I added, opening my browser to headlines I'd already seen a dozen times that morning. Langford heiress accused in estate dispute mystery. Anonymous post alleges threats, tampering in billionaire's will. Private security firm confirms investigation into Langford estate. My phone buzzed again. Emails. Mentions. Comments. The post had gone supernova. "Please," Hollis said. "We can fix this." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, you can't." That afternoon, Bryant called again. "They've gone quiet," he said. "Which means they're regrouping or they're scared. Both are good signs." "Doesn't feel good," I admitted. "That's because you're still used to being scared of her." He was right. Even now, with the truth out, with the whole mess spilled into public view, part of me still expected Hollis to walk through a door and convince the world I was overreacting, unstable, delusional. She was good at that. She had the charm, the poise, the practiced expression of a woman always in control. But that power was eroding. You could see it in the headlines now, in the fact that her publicist was unavailable for comment, in the photos that began circulating, Hollis storming out of a building, shielding her face, while Marlene remained nowhere to be found. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew the game wasn't over. You don't walk away from a fortune like that without blood or fire. That night, I didn't sleep again. But it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was the sound of the motel AC finally dying, grinding out one last breath before going silent forever. Just like Hollis's empire. It took 9 more days before the investigation became official. 9 long, humming days where the world dissected every angle of Hollis's inheritance, Orville's death, and the possibility that I, a washed-out IT guy with anxiety and a suitcase full of thrift store shirts, had managed to bring down the queen of her own empire. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to breathe. After the post went viral, I received dozens of interview requests. Morning shows. Podcasters. Even a documentary team sent me a floral arrangement. Why? I don't know. Maybe to butter me up for an exclusive. But I declined everyone. Fame wasn't what I wanted. Not even the money, really. I just wanted to walk into a room without wondering who was lying to me. Hollis tried to call 2 more times. I didn't pick up. She sent a letter once, handwritten, of course. Elegant. I didn't read it. I burned it behind the motel in a rusty coffee can. It felt too ceremonial to be accidental. Marlene still hadn't surfaced, but the PI said she'd transferred large sums of money to an account in South Africa. I don't know if she fled, or if she was sent away, or if she simply didn't want to be dragged into the legal crater Hollis now stood in. Either way, she was gone. The last time I saw Hollis was through a screen, her face pixelated on the local news, stepping into a courthouse with dark sunglasses and a scarf tied too tightly around her neck. She looked smaller. Not physically, just dimmed. Like someone had taken a sponge to her shine. Her assets were frozen. The Langford Charitable Trust was under review. And the revised clause in the will, plus the letter Orville wrote, which had now been authenticated in triplicate, meant the original inheritance was restructured completely. And as for me, I didn't take the money. Not all of it, anyway. I had the right to half. Legally. Orville's clause made that painfully clear. And people told me I'd be a fool not to take it. You could retire today, they said. Disappear. But disappearing didn't sound as good as it used to. And I didn't want to retire from life. I wanted to walk into it, finally, without the weight of hers on my back. I accepted a much smaller portion, just enough to live with dignity. Just enough to start over, not as a millionaire, but as a man who finally knew what it meant to choose himself. I moved out of the motel 3 weeks after the story broke. Rented a tiny house 2 towns over, near a used bookstore and a walking trail that smelled like pine in the morning. I planted a few tomatoes. Burned my old suits. Bought a cheap bicycle and a more expensive coffee maker. And for the first time in years, I woke up without bracing for silence. One afternoon, I sat at the little desk in my new kitchen, flipping through a copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Not because I wanted to seem deep, but because I finally had time to read the books I used to pretend I'd read. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a soft voice. No footsteps. No whispers. No manipulation pressing down on my ribs. Just quiet. Real quiet. I opened my notebook and wrote down a single sentence. Not for Reddit, not for the lawyers, not for revenge. Just for me. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to stop apologizing for existing. The phone buzzed once. A notification from the bank. A payment cleared. A bill settled. A small reminder that life was still made up of errands and details. But this time, they were mine. My choices. My rhythms. My silence. And in that silence, I didn't feel lost. I felt free.